So you see right there. So look, anyway, you see how he using the Tommy gun to get to the point. So you can kind of excuse the violence, but it's just symbolically of how all of that stuff is going to be written away of all of that false identity. Trying to keep people in the deception. So you see how you got the Tommy gun. So you understand the whole thing with the Tommy gun. It's very serious because Tommy gun just going to John, just blasphemy, of how to use that Tommy gun. But the Tommy gun just goes into John chapter 20, verse 29. Yeshua saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me and thou hast believed, blessed are they that have not seen and yet believe. So you see the whole thing with the Tommy. You see how much they blaspheme. So it's important to, that's why they had to say the game of curling was basically had a notary by John. Because when you understand John, with the whole written history of curling. So it was all recorded, by John, because John goes into nothing but the whole thing of how, like I was just talking about, it's just blasphemy at the cornerstone. And how you have John that was speaking of Christ returning, the Lamb of God returning to bring salvation to the world. John the Baptist, so that's how they blaspheme. You got John dealing with a game, dealing with stones. This stuff is serious. So I was actually, researching an old movie back in the day called Fargo. It came out in '96. But anyway, you have William Macy on there, who plays Jerry, the main character, and you have Carl, played by Steve, and they're dealing with cars. So, as you can see, it was about like a car salesman, William, who's from Jerry in Minneapolis, have gotten himself into a debt, and is so desperate for money that he hires Carl and Peter to kidnap his own wife, and then they collect the ransom money from the wealthy father. You see? And then they end up shooting the state trooper. So the state trooper, like I said, it goes into Satan's law being overtaken by, Carl, by the Kara, the Karas, Christ, with the law of Zion, to the law of Satan being taken away by the law of Zion flowing from Zion. That's why they had to shoot a state trooper, because the state trooper deals with what? The cars on the highway. You see? That's how deep this all goes. And then Minnesota area, you see, that all goes right to the curling game anyway. You got the Fargo, which is obviously, North Dakota. So, all that stuff is all, set up, man. So it all deals with the car, and kidnapping. Because that whole kidnapping going to the whole aspect, kidnapping the wife, because that goes back into the whole theme of the Exodus, when the bride represents Jerusalem anyway, Israel. Remember he says, I am married unto you, O Israel, return unto me, for I'm married unto you. And then, right now, too, you got John battling against Gunther. He about to fight him in D.C., that's final match. Fighting in D.C., that's dealing with the law again, So, you got, obviously, as it's written in Micah 4:2, and many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So that's why right now you got John symbology, and then you got 50 Cent, dealing with the Sean John. You see exposing, yeah, man, he was a party man, a wild party man. He had people paying for their own funerals. Biggie paid for his own funeral, Everybody, yeah, man, Sean John, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, because the Puff Daddy, it just goes to all of the things of being puffed, as it's written in the scripture.